Hi, everyone. I'm Simon from Stampix and super excited to host this Loyalty Expert Talk. Today, we have a very special guest on. It's the VP of Customer Experience from Dominion Energy, dialing in all the way from the US. Utibe, can you quickly introduce yourself and welcome, of course?
Oh, thank you so much, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Utibe Bassey, as you've said. I'm part of the team at Dominion Energy, and our focus is, or my focus at least, is customer experience, customer service, and all things customer, whether it's strategy or operations. I've been at Dominion close to 5 years. And before that, I was in the financial services industry, working in a few different organizations.
Cool, that's great. And the reason we had this conversation is in part because your profile caught my attention because it has like the little tagline, "Love as a KPI." And so, I wondered if you could quickly explain what it really means.
It's so love as a KPI, the thought behind it. As you're a business person, I'm sure your audience has people in all sorts of businesses at all stages of maturity, and we part of what we really focused on are our key performance indicators, right? Whether it's sales or it's churn or it's clicks, whatever those things are, we have the things that we think are most important. And love as a KPI is asking the question, well, if we're measuring what matters the most, should we not also measure how we're leading people? Should we not measure how people are impacted after they interact with our organizations? And for me, the word love is a very intentional word, because it's, I believe, the thing that I want to say all, I can't speak for every single human on the globe, but I would say vast majority of people need. And when it's provided to them, even through companies, they do respond with all the other KPIs that we're looking for, whether it's loyalty, sales, advocacy, all of those things. And so love as a KPI is really, again, it's intended to catch one's eye or ear, but it's asking the question, what else should we be measuring as it relates to business success?
Yeah, nice. And it's also an acronym, right? LOVE stands for different things. Maybe you can quickly go over them.
Yeah, so a good acronym, of course. And so when I thought about, people like, so what does that mean practically? Like practically, what does that mean to love through a business? I was like, well, there are 4 ways. And it just so happens that those 4 ways sum up to an acronym. The first and most important, to be honest, the one that if it doesn't work, everything else falls apart, is the L, which is for leadership. And so the people, the human leaders, and that could be leader of the whole organization, leader of a team, leader of a project, but whoever is in that role of leader, how they engage people, they could choose to be loving or not loving. They could choose to be kind or not kind. They could choose to be, and loving is not a soft, this is not about hugging people at work and, allowing, inefficiencies or allowing bad behavior. That's not loving. Loving is not an emotional state. It's actually thinking about the best, looking for the best interest for other people. Sometimes that's hard, right? And so the way a leader engages people is the first determinant of how you can love through business. A leader that takes time to listen to their team, to coach their team, to give their team hard feedback, a leader that thinks about not just seeing their team member as a means to an end, but seeing the team member as the end to begin with. That's how leadership, the L, that's what the L stands for, it's leadership. The O is for offerings, and that's a catch-all, Simon, for your products, your services, your experiences, anything that you offer. And that could be to a customer, that could be to an employee, but whatever that offering is, you could see how much people care about their stakeholders through that offering, right? Whether it is that you go to a coffee shop and everyone there just stares at you and they're rude and they don't say good morning, that's an indication of how they see you, or the opposite. But whatever that offering is, the way you feel and how you see the people that are stakeholders is evident. That's the O. V is for value. And the question is, the degree to which you provide value to people is also an indication of how much you love them or not. You could say the bare minimum, right, is at least provide them a product or service that works. At least let it work well, let it do what it promised, because a lot of organizations don't even do that. You can go all the way up to you have something that works. The next level is you can love them through that value proposition. And the third level there is how can you enable the people to be conduits of love themselves. So the degree to which we provide value. Example of that is in America, a company that whenever I ask the question, what comes to mind when you think of a great experience, people love this company called Chick-fil-A. It's a fast food restaurant. They come up all the time. And I always ask, well, why Chick-fil-A? There are many, many fast food restaurants. There are many places you could even argue, no one send me any hate mail, but there are many places that could even have a better chicken sandwich than Chick-fil-A. But they provide more than the functional value. It's more than a chicken sandwich. They say the words "my pleasure" after they've served you, right? Always clean, always polite. So they've added more value to you as a customer beyond the functional. And the E is for engagement. And this is kind of my catch-all for everything that underpins how organizations interact with people. That's culture, that's language, that's policies, all of those things that fuel what the day-to-day is like. Your love or lack of love for stakeholders is evident in there. And so that's the acronym LOVE. There's a lot baked in, but those are the avenues through which you can practically love people.
They're basically four umbrella terms for a lot more.
That's
But
right.
let's maybe unpack the last one, the E from engagements, because when we were prepping for this conversation, I was thinking an energy brand, wow, that must be really hard to engage the customer. Of course, there's multiple stakeholders, but when we talk about engaging customers, could you explain a little bit how Dominion Energy works as a company, how the relationship is with the customers, and how you try to build engagement?
Great question. So I've been at Dominion almost 5 years, and I will say this: before I joined, I didn't really know how utility companies operated. Right, I had never worked for one or know anyone who worked for one. But here's the good news about Dominion, even outside of the CX focus that we've had over the last 5 years. We're a mission-driven company, meaning everything we do. Right, we're a power provider. We're a utility. The light that's on right now that's enabling me to have this conversation, our job is to make sure that we keep the lights on, we keep power reliable. That's number one, affordable and increasingly clean. So we've always have one of the moments that you see the company sort of shine the most is when there's a storm, literal storms, because there's a lot of outages and it's all hands on deck. Whether or not you have a traditional storm job, during a storm you have, so there's that mission drivenness about Dominion already. And so the question has never been, does the company care about customers? Of course it does. The question really more has been, how do we need to engage differently so that there's a lot more consistency across the journey? How do we need to engage differently so that it's not that we think about the downstream impact of things done upstream? How does it impact, the customer downstream? And so it's been more of a reframe than a start from scratch, because again, it's a company that all it does is it exists to serve and meet the needs of customers. And so on the topic of engagement, it's been, at least from my perspective and my focus over the last few years, has been what can we introduce into the culture? What tools, what frameworks, how do we help the culture evolve even in how it sees customer experience? Because customer service, as you know, is different from customer experience. Customer experience is a lot more involved. It requires a lot more collaboration across teams, and it requires more tools. There's a practice to it. So that's been, I think, the focus is not in starting, but in helping to reframe and making sure that we can think more holistically about the customer experience.
All right, great. So when you're applying that vision that you created for expressing love through business, trying to achieve a positive impact, how do you convince stakeholders that this actually has impact on retention, on loyalty, NPS, and ultimately profits at the end of the day?
That's a great question. One of the things, right? So of course, I talk about love as a KPI. I write about it. I have a book coming out about it. I'm very vocal about it, but I know that it's not the word to use in every circumstance, depending on the audience. But the essence never goes away. The way I describe it and the things how I position it, because the goal of communication is not to say what you want, is to have people hear what's useful. And so I don't focus on my thing. I focused on what's the essence of the message that can be applied. And so I work in a utility company, right? There's some of my colleagues with whom love as a KPI is something we talk about. There's some of my colleagues with whom I will talk more about the outcome and the way to get to the outcome. And so your question on sort of convincing, I think number one is, if anyone is looking to convince any stakeholder group of anything, you have to speak their language.
Mhm.
Even though you know exactly what you mean, you have to sort of translate it to their language. It's clear through, and here's all the areas, Simon, that I've looked at. I've looked at actual research, like that goes back decades, in the impact of feeling and experiencing being loved. And love, again, not the mushy butterflies, are seen, appreciated,
Mhm.
valued, known, the impact of that on human actions and reactions. And there's a clear link to that experience driving literal loyalty. So think about when people say people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Mhm.
The opposite is true. People stay with managers, right? They're people with whom they've experienced their manager, their leader, go above and beyond for them, and it weds them to that leader. Like, talk about what loyalty is, right?
Mhm.
Loyalty is really truly, and if you get to the heart of it, it's a reaction to something. It's not just a head thing, it's like a gut reaction to something. And so while that manager or that leader may not have said the words "I love you," they've demonstrated through their actions that it's not about them, it's about their people. And
Mhm.
so that, and the talk about how do we convince, my number one thing I love to do is help people see for themselves how this is true in their own lives.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for me to present, like, of course I have research, I've done, I have actual research, I have anecdotal evidence, I have case studies, I have a lot of arsenal
Mhm.
on this work. But I don't usually start there. I will probably start, if I was trying to convince you of something, Simon, I would ask you enough questions where you realize this is actually true in my own life. There are people and organizations I'm loyal to because of how they've seen me and what they've demonstrated in terms of my worth. So there's a clear link. The best is if people see it for themselves, and if that doesn't work, then you bring out the data.
Yeah, and I think it's already a great example that you gave. Your experience on the work floor with leaders can make sure that people stay around for a leader or leave it. So we can all relate to that. And then the next thing is to expand that to, Dominion Energy, for example. Great leadership is going to ultimately result in higher loyalty of the customers as well. But yeah, let's talk about loyalty for your specific case, because
Yeah.
what I understood is actually that people don't read, there is no really alternative for you guys. So that makes it even more interesting and actually, remarkable that you're investing in loyalty, that you're keeping track of the voice of the customer, etc. Can you explain us a little bit the context of
Yeah.
Dominion Energy when it comes to loyalty and what some of the challenges are, nonetheless?
It's a great question. When so I used the example of Chick-fil-A earlier,
Yeah.
right? If everyone loves Chick-fil-A, a lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people do. But if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else, right? You can choose, what I prefer, McDonald's, or I prefer a gourmet sandwich shop. We are a state regulated utility. We provide the power to certain jurisdictions, to certain parts of the state, of the states that we're in. Our customers don't have a traditional choice in that way, or they don't always have. And what's interesting is, earlier on in my own journey in this work within Dominion, someone asked me, they said, and actually I get this question even since, like, why does it matter? Like, why does it matter? Like, why do we, because one of our think about metrics like NPS, like, why does loyalty matter? Like, why do we invest? And it's a good question on the surface,
Hmm.
but I think it shows a lack of a depth of understanding of what loyalty really means. Because it's not just about, it's not based only on them choosing another option. It's based on how advocacy, like, will our customers advocate for us if we want to do a big project, right? Those are the sorts of things that are important. Will they speak up for us if we did have additional products and services? Will the brand mean something to them, to the point where they will say, I would recommend this brand, or I would choose this brand? In particularly when you don't have a choice, when an experience is poor, it feels, I don't know, I don't have the statistics, but I would guess at least twice more damaging, because you can't choose with your legs, you can't choose with your feet. And so it's up to us to make sure that we continue to invest, to make sure that our customers, even if something goes wrong in the experience, have enough good experiences with us where it's managed. Because the customer that you don't want is a customer who is so aggrieved by a company and they don't feel like they have a choice, and they ultimately end up being a complete the opposite of being an advocate. And so for companies and for organizations, and I know you have a broad audience, Simon, where the choice is not traditional, it's even more important. I actually believe that it's even more important because what you do is of more consequence when they don't have that choice in the traditional way.
Yeah, and it's also for you guys being there at the moments that it matter. You mentioned the storm, and so you're touching a lot of lives, and ultimately it's about doing good for society and for others, and that's what we're all about, right?
That's right, 100%. It's a duty. Like we see it as an obligation, as a big responsibility that we have to provide. Since COVID, even more people work from home, even more people learn from home. We provide power that literally powers people's every day. And so you have to go into it with the posture of service and not the posture of no. And so that's what I think what makes the culture special, because there truly is this honor and posture of service to the community. You're absolutely right.
That's great to hear. So how do you measure if you're doing well or poor? How do you keep track of yourself? Which metrics are important to you specifically in your role as VP of customer experience?
NPS, we measure a ton, as you can imagine. Everyone I'm sure you meet has a lot. We measure CSAT, customer satisfaction, but NPS is probably the marquee metric. And of course, everything else is supplemental and allows us to attack or understand different specific touch points. But the loyalty question is a big one. Whenever I talk about that question, I don't gloss over it. Asking how likely are you to recommend, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. We're asking you to put your reputation on the line for us. We're asking you to put your reputation on the line with people who you will see over and over again for us. And so if someone says, how likely are you to recommend, this brand? If a stranger asks us one thing, I'll never see that stranger again. If my friends or family are asking, I have to see it. So we think that that's a really good high bar for us to be aiming for.
So is my interpretation correct that usually companies measure it to sort of predict whether a customer is going to stick around or retain? And you guys, it's more about measuring reputation?
It's reputation, it's likeliness to advocate, it's likeliness to support, because again, based on the kind of industry that we are in, we do need support for things like that, right? Likeliness to, again, if we provide, like for example, electric vehicle charges, if we provide other products and services, likeliness to buy and to engage, likeliness to respond. So it's not the same in terms of CLV in that traditional sense, but it's how deeply embedded and trustworthy are we with our customer base, and what can we do to improve it? So brand reputation, advocacy, loyalty, that's what loyalty means to us.
Yeah. Now, a lot of companies are, I think 90% of companies have some sort of loyalty strategy, but a big proportion of those also are developing a formal loyalty program with rules, points, miles, whatever the mechanic is, to eventually, retain and engage the customer. You don't have one in place yet. Is that sometimes on the drawing table, or is that an idea maybe for the future?
Right now we don't have that. It's an interesting concept, because the question will be, what does that mean for, for utility, given the context that I shared. But I never want to shy away from a prompt. It's something I would love to give a thought to, like, what could that look like? What does that mean? Obviously, less in the vein of loyalty, we have a lot of programs that help people manage their usage. There's incentives tied to those programs. Maybe there's a view of those as loyalty programs, but they're not. They're not earned based on like tenure or anything like that. But I really like that prompt. Like, what could that be? I will spend some time thinking about that. What could that be if it was applicable? But the context as it stands, again, just being the kind of company that we are, it does not apply in the traditional sense.
No, I think it's logical from your perspective specifically, but there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this that are in the consultancy space, that are really experts on loyalty programs. I'm quite sure that one thing they would all recommend is first to do an introspection to be really clear on what the brand values are. So that's maybe a good bridge to the actual question. Can you explain to us what Dominion stands for as a brand, and how you make that brand promise real for your existing customers?
These are really great questions, Simon. So the company's mission is to provide reliable, that's a big one, affordable, and increasingly clean energy that powers our customers every day. And it could read either as simple and obvious. In fact, we prefer that it reads that way, but it's a lot of work to make that happen daily, right? It's something to take for granted. that it's easy to take for granted what all it takes. And this is, I'm speaking as someone who's new to this industry. I still consider myself new and has been amazed at all that it takes to provide reliable power, right? It's for me, it's like the switch, when I turn the switch on, it should be on. But all that it takes to rely, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, a lot on the affordability front, of course, a lot on the increasingly clean front as well. It's a value, so that's the mission, and of course it's underpinned by certain values. This is a company, and I'll talk about specifics to your question, but this is a company where the values are not just on a slide somewhere. The values are lived, right? We have very specific values that are lived. And so I'll take one obviously key value for us, which is safety. That has to be a value for a company like ours that has a lot of different jobs, and a lot of those jobs are doing things that could be considered dangerous, right? We have folks in this, it's raining outside where I am right now, in places where it's windy and there's a storm, there are going to be Dominion Energy colleagues going up on, many feet in the air to restore power. And that happens daily, day in, day out. And so safety is a core value, and that includes us. There's some like standards that you have at Dominion, like how you park a car. So whether or not you work in an office or the field, you have to back into a parking spot. It's the safer way, right? We start a lot of meetings with safety moments where people share specific safety pieces of advice, maybe tied to the season or the weather. You always have to have a safety moment. We track, we manage tied to safety. And so there's other values, of course. There's this notion of one Dominion, which is about collaboration and being united and aligned. But everything that we do, this is a company where the values are brought into daily conversation. That's how you know it's real in an organization, when people reference specific values in the daily conversation, when the actions of the people reflect them. I'll give you one. When the formation of an individual is a reflection of the values of the company. So I always tell the people this, I'm very open. When I joined Dominion, it's not that the company I was working for was not safe, Simon, but safety was not, I didn't save safety. I didn't have any inclination towards safety. I didn't think about it. I didn't think about how I parked. I didn't think about how I walked down the stairs. Didn't think about it. But within months of working there, it changed me. Values are real when they change the person, not just when they show up again on a slide, but when people start to act differently because of the values. And I think that's I can go deeper into this topic because I really am passionate about how values become real. But it's in the language, it's in the behaviors, it's in the leadership. Senior leadership demonstrates it, and therefore it changes the people in the company towards it.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and circles back to where we started the discussion with love, expressing love through business leadership.
That's right.
Great. Now we started with the framework of love as a KPI. I told you that I also have a little framework at Stampix here that we adopt, which is called the loyalty ladder, which I'd love to share with you. It's pretty new, so I'm gonna quickly share my screen and walk you through, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about it.
You got it.
You should be seeing this now.
Yes, and as you share your screen, I'm gonna wear my own screens.
Good. So this is what we call the loyalty ladder, and on the left-hand side you see customer engagement, which we touched on. This can be measured by percentage of people engaging actually of the base, could be NPS score, could be a combination of those things. For some brands, it's just how many people are reading their newsletters, for example. But then on the bottom axis, you see over time what we traditionally see many businesses undergoing as they evolve in loyalty. Usually it starts in a pretty transactional state where there's what we call deal loyalty with points, discounts. And I guess for Dominion, it's even a step before, because people have to be loyal to you, right? So there's not even that transactional exchange where they need to buy. Well, of course they purchase the energy, but it's not like they can switch to other providers. If then a loyalty program is being built, usually it's still centered a lot around the earning side of points. There's certain rules, tiers, segmentations, and that next level is the experiential level, where typically they will start to include rewards that are, for example, exclusive experiences. There's elements of gamification, surprise and delight that really differentiate from brands and can build emotional connections. Then a lot of brands are trying to bring it all together, use the modern technologies such as AI to really deliver a omni-channel customer journey that's personalized, that takes into account their social channels, their CRM, different data platforms. And then that last layer, and this is really where I want to pick your brain on, is where we see brands making room to tap into local communities, to develop shareable moments, and to really express their values, their brand values, try to get the customer base engaged, to deliver user-generated content, for example, and to really reinforce that brand identity. So for your specific case, I guess it's pretty hard. You don't go through this traditional ladder, but maybe the third and the last one, the experiential part and the communities, the advocacy stage. Are there any initiatives that you guys do to, to help local communities, for example, or to surprise and delight customers?
You're right. We don't have this traditional arc, obviously, again, based on the context. But there are a few things that I think run parallel, even to this topic of love as a KPI, and certainly some things that I can point out from a Dominion perspective. Advocacy is, all the things that we do, again, to deliver on a good experience. That's what we're ultimately solving for. And the things that make customers really truly become advocates is, there are many things, but I know one of them is how much they see us either caring or investing in things that matter to them. We are one of those companies where a lot of our employees themselves live in the communities that we serve, which you would expect. And so a lot of our employees are also customers. We do a lot of work in the community. We have an obligation to serve everyone. And so we're actively, in fact, there's a part of our team, so I'll shout out the energy assistance teams across all our markets, who spend a lot of their weekends in communities, doing community events, handing out brochures, helping to educate customers, connecting customers who need help, financial assistance with sources of funds. All of those things are done. And we believe, again, it's our obligation, it's our responsibility to help every customer who we reach, who finds us, who we reach, of course, connect them with support. We believe things like that make a meaningful difference in how, whether it's, because I think loyalty, there's staying with a company and then there's being loyal to a company. I think those are two separate things. I think you could have someone who's staying begrudgingly because you could have someone who has a bank account and they haven't switched banks because there's too many steps, right? They don't like the bank they're with. They hate it, in fact, but just they don't want to go through the switching costs are high. They don't want to go through all the labor. I would say that they're not loyal. They're just there, And so even for us, like, we want our customers to be loyal. We want them to not begrudgingly be a customer. We want them to see value in it. And I one of the reasons I love that arc is you're doing things beyond the person, and you're reaching into places that they care about, which who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love the idea of that? Especially if a company is doing that in the places with the communities that they care about. People like me, people always love, how much do you recognize people like me, right? And I think that arc demonstrates the journey from the individual transaction to them being a company or a brand that does things for people like them, even if it's not them. The last thing I'll add, when I was at MetLife, we found that when customers knew, they didn't even have to use these services, but when customers knew that we had value-added services, it drove their NPS up, whether or not they used it. When they used it, it drove it up even more. But if they knew that you have services that help people like them, they're like, oh, this is a trusted brand. And so that's something that I know works. And so there's a lot in that arc. It's very telling.
Yeah, great. It's good to hear. Good to have good feedback. And one of the things we do at Stampix is to promote bringing some joy into your loyalty program or in your brand mission. We do that with something specific as personal photos, which are of course very deeply emotional. And there's research on that end as well that proves that when people print their photos, hang them around in the house, that it has a positive impact on self-esteem, on family ties. Imagine sending some pictures to grandmas of the children. That's of course moments that are priceless for them, but relatively affordable. And so we try to inspire brand on this mission of ours, which is bringing joy and joyalty to brands.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. It's wonderful for all the reasons that you've described. It's wonderful because it's unexpected. It's not intrusive, but it's personal. And I can see how it endears you to a brand. Like this brand is the source of this piece of connection. That's wonderful. That's brilliant. Yeah.
And random acts of kindness, I think we discussed it earlier as well, is that's something that a brand really can do for its community, its
Yes.
customers, its employees. So sometimes it's in the little things, we like to believe. Yeah.
I think you're 100% right. The third of the value, I talked about LOVE. Well, that value one, the crescendo is that you are enabling people to be loving to other people. Like that is a lot of value. So this random acts of kindness plays into that, is because the company is enabling people to be kind to other people,
Hmm.
right? The way the endorphins work, again, there's probably some scientists you could interview that talk about it, but I've seen in the research over and over and over again, we love that. We love to be kind. No matter what the world looks like in the news, we do
True.
love kindness. We're wired for it. And so how much more can a brand embed themselves in the lives of people if they're the source of people taking those kind actions? That's great.
Yeah, good. I think that's a great note to end the conversation. The world needs a little bit more love, and it was really wonderful to speak to you, TB, and wish you a lovely day.
I
Thanks
wish
so
you the
much.
same. Thank you. Thanks for having me.